All right, here we are for episode 3 of Art Does Stuff. And in this episode, Art is going to show us how to light a fire. But Art, this is not an ordinary fireplace, is it?
No, this is a Hampton HI 300 fireplace insert with a cast iron door and a blower unit. A couple things before we get started. First thing I always do is clean the glass on the inside because you get a buildup of smoke and creosote on that, and that if you let that bake on, it gets difficult to get off. So I use this hearth and stove cleaner. Works pretty well. It gets stubborn creosote stains, a little scotch scrubby that's dampened, helps get those off. But you have to be very gentle and careful with that. The glass is treated for the application here and is softer than regular glass. So I've done that already. Don't need to show you how to clean glass. A couple other things before we get started. First thing I always do is open the air control, this little slide here, and this controls how much air goes into the firebox. I've also turned off the heater to the house because, especially in this house, the heater's on. It sucks a lot of air out of this room and tends to pull the smoke out of the fireplace. So turn off the heater to get started. So we start by building a small fire with kindling. I start with these Safe Light fire starter squares. There's a number of others on the market. I usually use one or two of these little squares. They're treated. So I'll start by putting that in the middle of the firebox. And then I like to get some small pieces of wood that can get things ignited. Small scraps left over from splitting. I've got some hardwood scraps from my woodworking at home that make good kindling. So I get that kind of started in here. Kindling keeps falling over there. A lot of times like a 2x4 or something like that works good. This round piece of wood is not cooperating. Okay, that'll be good enough to get us started. Then there's a critical step. If the weather outside is 40 degrees or less, cold air settles in the flue pipe and makes it difficult to start the draft in the fire. So this little handy torch setup helps to heat up the flue. So I put the flue is right here in the front of the firebox. Just hold that in there for 30 seconds or so to warm up the air in the flue and get it flowing upwards, because as you all probably know, hot air rises. That should be good. And since then we have a fire going here already, the torch, we can go ahead and use that to light the fire starter squares in there. Now, it takes a little patience to get this thing going. Once it gets hot, it goes for a long time. But it does need air to start up. So what I do here is close the latch on the door before I close the door, and then just close it, but it's not sealed and latched all the way there. That lets in more air through the crack in the door, because this air control feature here doesn't provide quite enough air to get it started. And while we're waiting for that to get going, I'm going to grab a small piece of dry seasoned firewood, maybe two. I'll get ready to throw those in after my kindling catches fire here. You really have to kind of be patient and let the small fire build till it gets hotter and hotter, and then once it gets really hot, then you can throw in the big stuff.
How do you know if your kindling is dry enough?
Well, I have a steel moisture meter imported from Germany. It has two little metal prongs. You turn it on, put the prongs up against the wood, and anything under 20% is usually dry enough to burn. So this little piece here is 16, 17%. This one here is even drier still, down to 7, so that should burn very nicely. My favorite wood is oak, but here on the property we have oak, couple pine, sugar pine, ponderosa pine, white fir. So I mix in the softwoods also, but they produce more creosote, which then requires you to clean out your flue more often. The oak burns a lot cleaner and hotter. But since I've got that other wood, I like to mix that in and use it up.
How often do you recommend cleaning a flue?
The fireplace guys recommend once a year. It's probably a good idea, especially if you live somewhere where you're using this, regularly during the winter. For us, this is a vacation home. We use it on weekends and occasional days during the week in the winter. So we could probably go 2 winters before we need to get this cleaned out. I'll just mention that we got this unit installed by Sweeps Luck Fireplace Supply and Service here in, their store is in Agua Fria here near Blue Jay. They were extremely knowledgeable and helpful, and I really love this unit.
Do they have a website we can link in the video?
Probably.
Okay. We'll try to add that in.
So we see the fire's getting going pretty well. I know from experience it's not quite hot enough yet to close the door. It's still going to need some more air. Okay, I think our kindling is going pretty well there, so we'll throw in a couple more pieces of the slightly bigger pieces of oak. Try to get those going. I'm going to leave the door cracked open here for a little while longer. Get enough air in there to get this thing really raging. So back in a few more minutes. Okay, we've got a couple of larger pieces of oak in there on top of the kindling. They're starting to catch fire. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in a full-size log here. One thing that's pretty handy, especially after the fire gets going, is like a welding glove with a long gauntlet, so you don't burn your hand in there while you're carefully placing the wood. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to full capacity. It's going to take a little bit longer to get really hot and really start getting a draft going there. So I'm going to leave the door open, cracked a little longer. I'll just show you what happens real quick if you do close it all the way. The fire will start to die down a little bit, especially if it's not going hot enough. This one actually isn't too bad, but I'm going to open up the door, give it a little more air for a little bit longer. And you just kind of have to watch it, and then we'll come back in a little while to show you the full fire once it's going strong.
When would the little control lever there come into play?
After you get the fire really going, you've got a lot of wood in there, it's burning pretty hot, then you can slow down the burn rate by pushing that little rod in, because it allows less air to come in. So you can make the fuel last longer, but the box is still producing a lot of heat. Right now, again, I've got it open all the way to get as much air as possible to get it started.
And I noticed you had a decorative pot on top of your...
Oh yeah, that's a handy item, a little steamer that helps to humidify the room, especially on winter days when you're running heaters and fireplaces. It tends to dry things out. So this little pot is filled with water, and you can put essential oils in there also to make the place smell a little nicer. Set it on top of that the top of that stove, and that will heat up and vaporize the water and help to humidify the room.
What's your favorite essential oil?
I leave that stuff to my wife, Tricia. One of the things I really like about this is just, I think the fire is much prettier than in a regular fireplace. So we'll show you that when we come back. One thing I wanted to mention, because I told you to turn off the house heater before you start this process. Once this door is latched and the fire is going, it draws enough air in on its own that the heater doesn't adversely affect it. So once you've got the door latched tight, you can go ahead and turn your house heater back on if you would like.
We're back.
Okay, we're back. I fully latched the door probably 5 minutes ago. The fire's going good now. It'll continue to get a little bit bigger and a little bit hotter, but that's most of the work and the patience part. A couple other features I'll show you real quick. On this unit, it has a blower. It has two switches down here. One is on a thermostat, or runs a thermostat, so it turns on the blower when it gets hot inside the firebox. I usually just leave it on manual and control it myself. The fan is a 2-speed, low and high. You can probably barely hear that on the video now, but what this does is sucks air in underneath the firebox, circulates it around the firebox, and then out this space up above. After the fire's been going for a while and it is hot, it really puts out a lot of heat and really helps to warm up this room in this house, which had some heating problems before we put the fireplace in. So I think that's it. It'll continue to burn. When it starts to burn down, you throw another log on the fire, and it's all pretty easy, but you have to have a little bit of patience to get it going. So we'll sign out now. That's how Art does it.